Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. We're going to start out tonight with Mary Joan Cath, aka Bonnie Lou, who died recently at the age of 91. Bonnie Lou is perhaps the first female rockabilly singer in the United States. She's an Illinois girl, came from Towanda, which is right outside Bloomington Normal off I-55. Of course, there was no I-55 back then. In the 40s, after the war, she was listening to hayride music and country music coming out of WLS in Chicago. WLS didn't go rock and roll until 1960. In the days before, there was one of the biggest country music stations in the United States. It was playing hillbilly music and country music for the southern migrant workers who came from Appalachia to Chicago to work. Then Bonnie Lou moved to St. Louis, started to hear her first rock and roll. She moved to Ohio, and as a singer, she fused them all together in a style sort of like Carl Perkins, but she was one of the first women to do it, and it was called rockabilly. In 1955, she had a big top 20 hit with the classic rockabilly song Daddy-O. This one was co-written by Brian Wilson's dad, Murray.
Daddy-O, Daddy-O, sure good-looking Daddy-O, Daddy-O, always cooking Daddy-O, Daddy-O, ready to go. All the girls are batty over Daddy-O. You couldn't call him handsome, but he's loaded with style. Always wears a t-shirt and a great big smile. There's something about this crazy kid we all love so. When he's around, the girls will holler Daddy-O, 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 sure good-looking Daddy-O, Daddy-O.
Yeah, that's pure 50s there. Another one of her songs, Tennessee Wigwalk, became an obscene anthem in the 1970s for British football clubs. Well, as a woman with a new style, it was really tough for her to break in, especially because she didn't want to move to New York. So her popularity was primarily local in the Ohio Valley around Cincinnati for the rest of her career. She's another one of those artists that I believe if she did today what she did then, pioneered a new style as a woman. She'd be a huge national star, maybe even an international star. Bonnie Lou, definitely ahead of her time. We're going to move on now to Marjorie Lord, who died recently at the age of 97. Marjorie Lord was known for two things. The first one is this.
This is the beautiful and charming actress co-starring every week on The Danny Thomas Show, lovely Marjorie Lord.
Thank you.
Actually, when the show started out, his wife was Jean Hagen, but she wanted too big a part, so Danny killed her off. And then he married his nurse in the show, and he used to call Marjorie Lord Clancy or Irish. Here's a clip where Ricky and Lucy come to Danny and Kathy's house, and Lucy takes Kathy shopping. And where Lucy's involved, you know things aren't going to go well.
It's a wonderful idea having us move in here with you. I told us we've done a lot of work today.
Sure. No Lucy interrupting every half hour. I tell you, Kathy's influence is beginning to take hold.
Yeah, and it's wonderful, too. You know, if I thought that Lucy was out with Ethel Merce instead of Kathy, in all the New York department stores, madre mia, ay, ay, ay.
Kathy is not an Ethel Merce.
Thank goodness.
And instead of being out spending your money, your wife is with my wife right this minute attending a lecture.
I feel so guilty. I told Danny we were going to a lecture.
And so we are. As soon as I get this loot home, you're going to hear a lecture like you never heard.
See, are you buying 7 negligees?
No, I'm only buying 2.
But you just ordered 7.
You just don't know men, do you, dear? You see, when I take these 7 negligees home, Ricky's going to say, ¿Qué lo que pasa? Mira que tal cosa, cabeza loca.
7 negligees. I'm so sorry, darling. I'm taking 5 of them back right away. And that works?
Every time. He's so glad I'm sending back 5, he forgets about the other 2.
I wouldn't dream of trying that on Danny.
You wouldn't, but Kathy, you owe it to him.
I owe it to him?
Of course, you're depriving him of half the fun of being married.
I am?
Honey, you know, marriage is sort of a contest. It's a battle of the sexes.
Oh, I never thought of marriage as being a contest.
Well, what else is it?
I never looked at it like that.
Well, it's about time you did. You owe it to your sex.
Hey, I dug up this clip of Marjorie Lord in a 1949 movie called Air Hostess, where she's trying to persuade one of her girlfriends to become a stewardess. Her girlfriend is Gloria Henry, who you may not know except for the fact that she became Dennis the Menace's mother 10 years later. And also in that movie was Barbara Billingsley, who you know is June Cleaver. Air Host is not a very well-known movie, but with 3 of the great sitcom mothers of all time in it before their glory days.
You're not making any sense, but I'm all ears.
Then be all eyes.
Dear Miss Jackson, your application has been accepted. My application? I enrolled you at Hanson's, my old alma mater. You what? Midge, Oh, you'll be getting away from this stuffy library in this dreary town where you're stagnating. And Midge, I don't want to be an air hostess. Oh, Ruth, it's a marvelous life. I don't want to be stubborn, Midge, but I'm just not interested. I wouldn't be good at it. I probably couldn't pass the course. And okay, forget it. I'll send them some excuse. It just never dawned on me that you wouldn't give it a try. Wait a minute. Midge, you know I'd do anything in the world for you, but then please take this course. Not for me, but for yourself. I'll bet that once you've graduated, once you've put on the uniform, you won't change it for anything except a wedding dress. You may even get married in your uniform.
Hey, those late 40s movies weren't exactly great examples of feminism. By the way, Marjorie Lord, the other thing she's famous for is she's the mother of actress Anne Archer. We're going to move on now to Dickie Moore, who died recently at the age of 84. Not the Dickie Moore we did a couple of weeks back, who was a child star. This is Dickie Moore, the Montreal Canadiens great, who played on the same line as Henri and Maurice Richard in the 1950s, when the Montreal Canadiens were the New York Yankees of hockey. Here's Canada's CBC on the death of hockey great Dickie Moore.
Hockey All-Star, Hall of Famer, and six-time Stanley Cup winner Dickie Moore has died at the age of 84. The Montreal Canadiens say Moore died earlier today. He joined the Habs at the age of 21 in 1951 and was part of the team that won 5 consecutive Stanley Cups. Moore is considered one of the greatest players in the history of hockey and was known as a skilled winger, shattering Gordie Howe's points record in 1959. His number 12 lives on in the rafters of the Bell Centre in Montreal, along with other legends.
Moore was a teammate of Jean Beliveau, whose podcast we did last year, and here's Montreal Television on the career of Dickie Moore.
He was born Richard Winston Moore in Montreal, January 6, 1931. He came to the Canadiens after a brilliant junior career where he won a Memorial Cup with the Royals in 1949 and with the Junior Canadiens in 1950. He joined the Montreal Canadiens the following year, and despite a fast start in the NHL with 18 goals and 33 points in his first 33 games, he finished the year back in junior and never really caught on with the team until the 54-55 season. From that point on, Moore was a major offensive contributor in the team's run of 5 straight Stanley Cup championships from 1956 to 1960. In 1957-58, he led the entire NHL in goals with 36, and he won his first scoring title with 84 points, despite playing the last 3 months with a cast on his broken wrist. But he saved the best for the following year. Dickie Moore won the Art Ross Trophy and broke Gordie Howe's league record with 96 points. He also led all playoff scorers with 17 points in 11 games. He will always be remembered as part of a line with the 2 Richard brothers, and because of his robust, aggressive style, was nicknamed Digging Dickie. The Dickie obviously stuck. However, injuries had taken its toll, and by the end of the 62-63 season, he was done. Moore missed the next year, but in 1964, was lured out of retirement by the Toronto Maple Leafs. In 38 games, he scored only 2 goals and retired for the second time. However, 3 years later, he was coaxed out of retirement once again by Cliff Fletcher after Fletcher watched Moore play in an old-timers hockey game. He played 27 games during the regular season in St. Louis, but in the playoffs, for the Blues, he regained his old touch with 7 goals and 14 points in 18 games. He finished with 261 goals and 608 career points. In 1974, Dickie was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. In November of 2005, the Canadiens retired the number 12 in honor of both Moore and Yvan Cournoyer. Aside from hockey, Dickie Moore will always be remembered as a good-hearted soul with a quick wit, who never shied away from a charity event or helping those who need it.
We're going to move on now to our feature tonight, Kurt Masur, who died recently at the age of 88. Kurt Masur was the leader of the New York Philharmonic for 11 years, from 1991 to 2002. He brought the New York Philharmonic back after some trying times in the 70s and 80s. That's what he's best known for here in the United States, but he was also active in London and Paris, and most significantly in Germany. He was the head of the Dresden Philharmonic for 7 years in the late 60s and early 70s, But most importantly, he was the head of one of Europe's most prestigious orchestras, the Leipzig Gewandhaus. He was the head there for over 25 years, and that's where he gained his reputation. Leipzig was the home of, among others, Bach, Telemann, Mendelssohn, Schumann, and Wagner, so you can imagine what an honor it was to be the conductor there. He grew up in a town in eastern Germany at the time, which is now part of Poland, and he grew up as a musician. Here he talks about it.
I have a piano teacher at my age of 10. And then she started with me also, of course, with some of the Schumann. The point is, for me, it was a discovery which was very strange, because first I was educated and I had a very good friendly teacher, which was not officially my teacher. She was organized.
He grew up in Nazi Germany, and his music career was ended when he had a tendon injury as a teenager. I don't know if he got that injury fighting with the Wehrmacht or not, because he did fight with the Wehrmacht when he was a teenager. After the war, he gave up his career as a musician, and he became a conductor. And in fact, he conducted without a baton because the injury wouldn't let him use a baton, so he always conducted with his hands. Leipzig was in East Germany, so he was part of the communist system during the Cold War. There's no evidence he was part of the Communist Party, but he was definitely favored by the communists, including Erich Honecker, who was the East German leader at the time. During the war, the Gewandhaus Orchestra Hall was bombed out, so he persuaded Honecker to have a new one built in Leipzig. Things got sticky for him during the later part of the 1980s when there was a pro-democracy campaign and East Germany was falling apart. He was looked on as something of a leader, and he had to broker a truce between street musicians and the East German secret police, the Stasi, in early 1989, and then later in the year he had to broker a truce between the Stasi and the pro-democracy people who were basically overturning the East German government. And he negotiated both of those things successfully. There was a rumor that he was offered the presidency of East Germany before it reunified with West Germany. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, a little while after this, he moved to New York to take over the New York Philharmonic. He was especially well known for conducting his Beethoven, and here's a 1996 PBS broadcast of the New York Philharmonic.
And the musicians of the New York Philharmonic are all in their places on stage. We await the arrival of the music director of the orchestra, Kurt Masur. Here he is to begin this all-Beethoven concert with the Leonora Overture No. 3.
He conducted the Star-Spangled Banner at the Philharmonic 9 days after 9/11, and here he is conducting one of my favorites, a little bit of the New World Symphony by Dvorak. He left the Philharmonic in 2002, not on altogether good terms, but his recordings remain some of the most popular in classical music today. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. As I mentioned before Kurt Masur became the head of the New York Philharmonic, he was the head of the Leipzig Gewandhaus, and 150 years before him, the music director of the Leipzig Gewandhaus was Felix Mendelssohn. So as a final tribute to Kurt Masur, we're going to have him directing the Leipzig Gewandhaus in a little bit of Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony.
After now 60 years of being conductor, I started some years ago to discover that the balance between outstanding good orchestras and outstanding good conductors doesn't exist anymore. And this was a moment where I felt it's just necessary to inspire the orchestras and young conductors to learn more about the past, that they can be able to go into the future.